We are Rogue Media Sports.
eBay Motors is here for the ride. With some elbow grease and a whole lot of love, you transform 100,000 miles and a body full of rust into a drive that's all your own. LED headlights, spoilers, whatever you need, eBay Motors has it at affordable prices. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride every time. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply.
With the Wells Fargo Active Cash Credit Card, you can earn unlimited 2% cash rewards on purchases you want and purchases you need. That means you earn 2% cash rewards on what you want, like season tickets to watch your favorite team, and 2% cash rewards on what you need, like paying for parking. That's the beauty of the Active Cash Credit Card. It's ready when you are, with unlimited 2% cash rewards. The Wells Fargo Active Cash Credit Card. That's real life ready. Terms apply. Learn more at wellsfargo.com/activecash.
It is the Doomsday Podcast, and in the aftermath, Ed Werder is, in fact, let me punch Ed up there. Oh, there he is. I want to be able to see Ed. I continue to, oh, good, Ed. I like that. I like the code. I like the look that you have today. Ed was at the ball game. I continue to be in France, but I'll be home soon. Ed,
hopefully we'll have all the penalty flags picked up by the time you get here.
It was remarkable. You are our resident historian, but I will say 166 yards. There were a combined 28 penalties, but the 166 yards were the most ever for a Cowboys team. Had to go all the way back to 1970 in a game with Washington. I think they had 161 yards. Ed, that's just a horrible. I would just say, Ed, I mean, it was rough to watch, even remotely, as I was to be there and to cover it. Was it just at some point did it almost become comical?
Yeah, and those keep in mind were just the accepted penalties. There were penalties, flags that were thrown, and the team decided not to accept the yardage. So those don't even count in the staggering total that we witnessed. 28 penalties evenly divided between the Raiders and the Cowboys. You know, I guess to some extent, maybe this was somewhat predictable because Sean Hockley's crew ranks pretty high up there, third or fourth in terms of the most penalties called on a per game basis. And then the Cowboys are only three teams in the league penalized more times going into this game than the Cowboys, and only five teams, the Cowboys being one of them, penalized more times than the Raiders. So you have two teams who commit a lot of violations and then an officiating crew that likes to throw a lot of flags and try to control the game. And even then, you probably don't expect to have a historic day of this magnitude. Like you said, I mean, the Cowboys have been playing football for 60 years. And they've never had a game where they've accrued more penalty yardage than they did. And to add to that, I mean, Anthony Brown, the Cowboys cornerback, became just the third player in a century, which last time I checked was 100 years, third player in a century to have 4 defensive pass interference penalties assessed against him in a single game. And obviously the last one in the mind of the Cowboys cost them the game. That seemed like a legitimate call. He wasn't playing the ball. He didn't turn his head around. You're going to get called on that almost every time. But Mike McCarthy came into the press conference, and I'm in that room right now, and he said, 28 penalties. What the hell do you want me to say? And spoke to Jerry Jones, the Cowboys owner and general manager, outside the locker room. And he talked about it's not the rule that is the problem. It's the discretion with the way it's being enforced by certain crews. In his mind, that's the issue. And he went so far as to say the Raiders basically out-game planned us because they like to play a vertical, game. They emphasize the down the field throws and the 50-50 balls that were drawing a lot of the penalties that the Cowboys accumulated. And Jerry actually said, knowing what I know now, I would have had more of a throw-up game plan, is what he called it. Throw-it-up game plan. And try and draw some more penalties. He said he thought the Raiders were brilliant in taking advantage of the way the game was called. And, oh, by the way, a final point, Mike McCarthy I spoke about the history of the teams and the history of Sean Hockley's crew. And Mike McCarthy said he actually talked to his players in the team meeting last night about that very thing, about this is going to be a heavy-handed game from an officiating point of view. And so we have to be mindful of that as we go out and try and play the game.
Yeah, and they were so mindful that they set a team a dubious record. That is, in fact, I can't even believe a Landry coach team ever had that many penalties. I don't have that hard of a time thinking a McCarthy coach team would. It is Matt Mosley. It is Ed Werder, Frito Nation Productions. Frito, please play the music. I love this new sort of theme we have where you are in whatever interview room, whether it's on the road or at home. I love it. And I like you being in there, and it sort of takes everybody. And I think it's sort of the freshness of you having talked with all the particulars. And you mentioned something that was of great interest, by the way, Ed, as we record this. It is now 4:30 a.m. where I am. I guess you're just kind of getting into your evening.
What time's the breakfast buffet open? Do they have those in France? I don't even know.
Can you imagine all the people coming down to the lobby and they're going to see me as they're heading to the breakfast? This is a strange thing. Breakfast does not start, I do not believe, until 6:30 or 7 a.m. Okay, Ed, but I thought that was interesting. What you said about Jerry, he called it a throw-up game, and he sort of almost doubted. And one thing Jerry will do every once in a while is doubt his own coaching. Now, one thing Jerry loves to do is praise some of his former assistants. And you had Rod Marinelli on the other side, and you had Rich Bisaccia, who was the Cowboys' former special teams coach. He is the interim coach for the Raiders. And the Raiders had come in a bad way. They had lost 3 straight. They had fallen to 5-5, and they come in and I think what'll happen is, you know how this is at the end of the season, Ed, you'll kind of look at this score and think of this as a game that the Cowboys scored quite a few points. But quite honestly, and let's start here. Let's start with the offense. It was not, and I know they were missing CeeDee Lamb because of the protocol. Start right there, Ed, because you always have interesting information. I understand the Cowboys were very optimistic that they were going to get CeeDee Lamb, but it was the independent neurologist who had the final say and decided that CeeDee Lamb was not ready to play in this game.
Yeah, I mean, I always thought it sounded like, I don't know. It didn't sound possible to me that a player could bang his head on the turf and be out of a game for the entire second half on Sunday. And 4 days later, he goes through this 5-step NFL concussion protocol and is cleared to play professional football and take more hits potentially to the head and further injure himself. I just didn't think that if there was going to be any faith in the concussion protocol and the NFL's emphasis on player health and safety, I don't know how you could possibly allow a player to go out 4 days later after he suffered a concussion and let him play again. But the Cowboys were definitely tracking that way. And I think part of it was, they got put in a bad situation because Amari Cooper, who tested positive for COVID and missed the Kansas City game. Now he was going to miss this game. Jerry Jones criticized him during the week, sort of indirectly. He took issue with the fact that he was unvaccinated and that allowed him to be tested every day. And if that hadn't been a requirement of his status, then maybe he wouldn't have tested when he did, at least, and been out of the Kansas City game at kind of the last minute, 48 hours before kickoff. And so I think that sort of created an urgency, given that they'd lost 2 out of 3 games. They'd been struggling on offense to get Lamb out there. They needed him to have any kind of explosive dimension to their passing game. And so McCarthy talked all week about, hey, he's gone through the practice. He's, doing well. He's passed all the standards that have been required to this point. And if he's cleared by the independent neurologist, then we would expect that he's going to play. And McCarthy made it seem like yesterday that he was going to play. And so did Dak Prescott. He said he looked great. In fact, the day before they had done some one-on-one drills, double moves, had him move his head and his neck and make sure everything seemed okay. But Dak did say today that he found out last night that Lamb was not going to play in the game. So again, it wasn't quite as last minute as the Cowboys made it seem, just like with the Dak injury, 3 weeks ago in Minnesota.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, you talk about all the players they're without, it's got to hurt you at a certain point. And on top of the two receivers they didn't have, I think there's some concern now about just how seriously injured, Ezekiel Elliott's knee is. He's downplayed it all week, said it only hurts him when he gets twisted or tackled a certain way, and it's only temporary, and he's able to play through it. He didn't play through it today. He was ineffective. Their run game has kind of collapsed on them in these last 4 games where they've lost 3 times. They're getting about half the yards rushing that they were the first part of the season. And, Dak Prescott talked about the fact after the game that, when we don't have both dimensions, it's a little different because now teams can start stacking it up against us in the passing game. They don't have to respect the run. We haven't been able to reestablish that and sort of thrown their offense out of balance. And I don't know when that's going to change because I don't think we have any sense of how seriously injured Ezekiel Elliott really is. And they seem not to be totally committed to letting Tony Pollard have the role. Although Jerry said Zeke was limited going into the game. And so our game plan actually had 25. Our goal was to get 25 touches to Tony Pollard. So that tells you something about how they view the seriousness of this injury that Zeke's dealing with right now.
Yeah. And we had seen, in the past, Dak had been sort of comfortable taking more of the game on himself. I find that interesting that he's bringing up how much the run game could help. I mean, I'm looking at the numbers right now, Ed, and again, it's going to be a very misleading type game because Dak throws for 375 yards and 2 touchdowns. Gallup and Wilson end up having big days, and yet the offense for much of this game was just in a slog, and of course you had the 1 touchdown that was, I guess that was the one to Schultz that was negated because of a holding penalty. There was actually 2 penalties on that play, but
on Tyron
Smith. Yeah. And then you had a 31-yard carry by Pollard that was negated on a call against Biotish. And I'll just tell you, Ed, I know it's always hard. You can see the TV monitor, but you're not hearing the commentary. But just so you know, I mean, even during the game, a lot of the commentary from Romo was kind of like, oh, I didn't see much there. Oh, that didn't really look like a penalty. So it's, I sometimes you just go, well, they were just horribly sloppy. But again, to your earlier point about sort of needing to understand how a game was being called, I find it interesting that Cowboys fans and even some people that'll be listening to this were just horrified and thought that was a bad call against Anthony Brown. Well, here's the deal. If you don't make even a tiny bit of effort to turn your head, if he turns his head at all, Ed, he's fine there. And it was a weird one because Zay Jones he almost kind of grabbed his head. But at that point, Anthony Brown had played so poorly and been called so many times. Even he said it after the game. He was going to get calls for it. And he did not try to play the ball. And so you hate to see that call get made because that ended the game effectively right there. But, Ed, we can't be shocked that the call was made given how the rest of the game was officiated.
Yeah, and, he did make the point that after he got his second defensive pass interference penalty, that it kind of sent the message to Derek Carr, to keep attacking him, that he was going to be called more often after he had established that he was not playing within the rules in the minds of the officials who were watching the game. Do I think every call made tonight was correct? No, I don't. I think there were some bad calls. I think the game was definitely overly officiated. And, Micah Parsons, the rookie, kind of made the point that it really took away from the ability of the defense to play aggressively. He said, "Hey, this is pro football. It's a man sport. It's collision. It's not supposed to be tag." I mean, he got called when Derek Carr basically fell into him and hit his head against his thigh pad as he was going to the ground. Micah Parsons didn't do anything to initiate contact, and he got called for roughing the passer or unnecessary roughness or something, 15-yard penalty in the middle of the field. And the Raiders took, they routinely capitalized and scored points on these defensive penalties. I think there were 7 penalties the Cowboys committed on defense that were on third down. I think all of Anthony Brown's penalties were on third down, and they led to 20 points. Well, 20 points in a game that's decided by 3?
Yeah.
I mean, but that wasn't the only problem the Cowboys had on defense. I mean, Anthony Brown, you could argue, outplayed Jordan Lewis, the slot corner. The slot corner Jordan Lewis was the nearest defender on 7 receptions Thursday, allowed 182 yards and a touchdown. That's the 3rd most yards allowed by any nearest defender this season. And the Raiders had 223 yards after the catch. They averaged 10 yards after the catch. That's their most yards after the catch in a game since 2018. And that's been a persistent problem for the Cowboys. They came into the game with the 2nd worst yards after catch allowed in the entire league. So they've been penalized throughout the course of the year heavily. They've had a problem with yards after the catch, and the Raiders exploited them in both areas today. And ultimately, that's what cost them the game. 166 yards in penalties and 223 yards after the catch.
Yeah, I agree. And think about the fact, Ed, that Waller is, I think most people would agree, is their best offensive weapon and has emerged as one of the better tight ends in the league. And he gets hurt and he never comes back. And in fact, he finally shows up in the second half at street clothes. And yet they think about that. Renfro is a good receiver. I mean, I don't think we think of him as some sort of huge downfield threat, although he ends up 8 catches for 134 yards. Deshaun Jackson, 3 catches for 102 yards, but he drew a couple of penalties. And then Zay Jones had 5 catches, 59 yards. He drew a huge penalty. There was everybody had a field day against them. And Ed, they were missing for much of the game their best weapon. I mean, that should have been a huge help. That should have offset some of the Cowboys missing their top 2 receivers, but it didn't at all. Yeah. It just kind of everybody else stepped up.
The Raiders hit the Cowboys defense for 2 50-yard plays in the game. The Cowboys had only allowed 2 50-yard plays over combined in their first 10 games. So that's how bad they were. And they couldn't get a consistent pass rush. That problem, I think, will be solved when they get DeMarcus Lawrence back probably against New Orleans. He's returned to practice this week. And Randy Gregory, whenever he comes back, a lot of people don't seem to think it's going to be against New Orleans, but sometime in the very near future. I mean, the Cowboys are, have kind of encountered their first crisis of the year. I mean, they responded so well to the Tampa Bay loss on opening night, went out, won 6 games in a row, including one with their backup quarterback on the road. They won in New England, but now they've lost 3 out of 4. And it's been for, I think, a lot of different reasons, but I think they feel like, and now they go on the road and play 3 straight games on the road. Now they're playing New Orleans. New Orleans got shut out in the first half today. So they're not what they used to be, but winning in the Superdome is still tough. They're still a pretty good defensive team against the run, which we've already talked about how difficult that aspect has been for the Cowboys. So I think they do confront a little bit of a crisis here. I think they still believe they're capable of, achieving the goals that they've talked about throughout the course of the year. And they haven't backed away from thinking that they're going to be in it deep into the playoffs and at the very end, possibly. And I guess if you have to lose 3 games, it's better to lose them to AFC teams than NFC teams because of the tiebreakers and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But they're just not playing very well right now. They did play. You're right. The score is a little misleading because they didn't really play offense until the fourth quarter. Dak had 200 yards passing in the fourth quarter. He's done that 3 times in his career. And the Cowboys have lost every one of those games. Look like this might be the first one they would win. But man, that's a lot of their yards coming in, once you're down double digits and you're, throwing the ball all over the field on every snap.
Yeah. It's a good thing they have a good punter. They were punting a ton in this game, and Anger actually he might've been the best player for the Cowboys. He and Micah Parsons this evening. Ed, the only thing, and we can point this out a little bit later, but don't look now, but the Eagles and the Washington football team are just 2 games back. I mean, we had pretty much dismissed them, and I still think the Cowboys will win this division, but we thought that we would never hear from any of those teams again.
Yeah.
And honestly, they're both playing a lot better. And now Jalen Hurts is emerging as kind of an interesting story. And I wanted to tell you real quick, what started as an afterthought turned into a huge business. It is Goodness Steak Seasoning. And Ed, even as, I know Jill always does such beautiful Thanksgiving meal. And I know Brian, everybody back home, everybody was probably having some great things, and there's so much a reason to give thanks. But I just got to say, Ed, don't you think some Goodness Steak Seasoning might even spice up some of that turkey? Could you see maybe just kind of reaching out there and putting that on some of the turkey and ham, and maybe that taking it to the next level?
Especially with like leftovers and a sandwich and so forth. Yeah, that sounds really good to me.
Yeah, my buddy Jason Below has started packaging his blends of Texas herbs and spices and sharing it with the world. It's great on steaks, great on turkey, as we've explained, chicken, hamburgers, grilled vegetables, and much more. Just go to bringthetasty.com to order your bottle today. If you can prove to me that you've ordered a bottle, these new Doomsday T-shirts will become one of yours. All right, I'm going to make that happen. Just go to bringthetasty.com, and a jar or 2 of Goodness Steak Seasoning would be a wonderful gift for your friends and clients this holiday season. Okay, it is time now to go to the man known as Stretch, and oh gosh, it's a little scary. I have to be up front with you and prepare you. Stretch is very tough on a couple of aspects of this one, and provides some interesting insight into what he thinks is going on with Dak Prescott and some of his errant throws. It is time for Stretch Plays. Glenn Stretch Smith, and Stretch has been around family today and had a happy Thanksgiving. Stretch was not happy for the Cowboys. Something when everybody was talking about this blueprint that Vic Fangio supposedly put together, and then you heard Romo talking about heavy hands, playing the Cowboys with heavy hands. You scoffed at some of that. But I know you saw some interesting things today from that Marinelli led defense that the Raiders have. What did you see, and what do you feel like was, because the Cowboys, I know they ended up putting up quite a few points, but for much of that game they were kind of slop on offense.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to start over on the defensive side, if that's all right, and just talk about, I do believe that Rod Marinelli absolutely went in and said, hey, here's the weakness of the football team. Here's where I would go. Here's where I think you're going to have the most success. Anytime a guy has been on a staff previously here, he's going to know the players, he's going to know the personnel. I did like when everybody made a big deal out of Vic Fangio saying, well, we played man match coverage. Oh, bull crap. Everybody plays that match up their guy on your best guy and then plays man. So, I thought that was just a bunch of hot air. Here's the concern I have is today there were multiple times that the Raiders went right at the Cowboys secondary throwing deep overs. And I'm saying they were max protecting, leaving the tight end in, leaving the back end, and just saying, you know what, we're going to outrun you running deep overs. Dallas never came up with at all, never came up with an answer to the deep over. Then it got so bad that you got a corner in Anthony Brown who lost every bit of confidence he had. You could tell in that young man's eyes in the middle of the third quarter when the camera would go on him and you got that look like a mule looking at a new gate. Pardon me, it ain't good. That far away look is not good, and that's something that as a corner you have to have real short-term memory loss. I mean, you got to be able to get over it. And Brown, even the time that he didn't get penalized, he looked at the official as if to say, "Why are you throwing a flag? Because I know I grabbed it." He had no answers for what Jackson was doing, running a 7 pump, which is a high angle corner and then a go. I mean, literally had zero answers for that. And so if you want to start talking about a blueprint, somebody putting out a blueprint, hey, buddy, it is out there now. They got issues with deep overs, and Anthony Brown has a confidence problem. And I think maybe some of that starts with, did he have any confidence in the fact that he was missing Donovan Wilson and a guy that he knew could come over the top and help him? I don't know, but it sure looked like when you look at it, I mean, that young man was defeated, beaten, whipped. I mean, it was really, I never felt so bad for a football player as I feel for that young man. And it's really hard to think that, here I am going to give this guy a failing grade, and you absolutely have to. But the thing that I'm also going to say, Matt, is that at some point I've been very openly honest about Dan Quinn, and I think he's done a hell of a job. But tonight, to leave that young man in that position, in that coverage, trying to run and go with Deshaun Jackson, when you obviously saw he had zero confidence and zero ability to even try to break on the football. I mean, it was almost like he was just fighting for his life to get to the fourth quarter, and then obviously in the overtime he gets the critical penalty. But it was I'm going to give everybody on the defense today. I really am. I'm going to say, you know what? At best, there were some guys that had some D's. Parsons is an incredible player. I mean, he absolutely had a winning grade, but defensive coordinator-wise, really poor. And to leave the secondary who has now been exposed, and I'm telling you, if you're a Cowboys fan, you officially have reason for concern with this secondary because they were beaten like a bass drum. And then when you're beaten, defeated, and then they literally they stepped on your throat in overtime, I think that's a blueprint that really is going to cause you some issues.
I need to ask you specifically, Stretch, about, because everybody's talking about it, the one that basically ended the game for the Cowboys when Anthony Brown had his back to the ball. Now, it looked like, I've watched that thing several times, I know you have too, it almost looked like the receiver grabbed his head. Now, a lot of times, if you don't turn around and try to play that ball, it's almost an automatic call. It really is in college for sure. It's not always that way in the NFL. Was that a case of that guy had been so bad that the refs were just going to call that since he was in that position? What did you see on that particular play?
Yeah. I thought all he had to do was just turn and even glance, and it wouldn't have been called. But here's what I'm going to tell you is I can guarantee you going into that game, Rich Bisaccia told the officials, hey, we've seen multiple occasions this guy's playing and grabbing down the field. He grabs all the time. We've seen it here. We've seen it here. And it's almost like he triggered the officials to say, hey, you better watch for this guy because when he is in a trail position, he is grabbing every time. And they knew they were going to run double moves. When you're in a trail position and a guy double moves you, as if he's going to go high angle to the corner and boom, he goes vertical, your first reaction is to reach and grab, tug, try to get yourself back in position. And I can guarantee you, notified those officials of that, and absolutely they knew that Anthony Brown could not run with Deshaun Jackson in a one-on-one situation. And like I said, unfortunately, Dan Quinn really was refusing to either play anything besides one and any kind of trail technique, and it really bit him, and it bit him hard tonight. And so I think that's it's something that you have to just shake your head at and say, boy, this is concerning. And now there is a real blueprint out there for how to attack the Dallas defense, and that is Anthony Brown, who, boy, I just can't imagine. I've never felt so bad for a kid in all my life. I mean, I'm really concerned about how just when you get that look, that deer in the headlights look, that you're lost. I mean, that's not good, and it's not. And I don't think it's good at all. That he really got put in that position, and he really got exposed tonight.
He did, and early in the season, it seemed like they were moving Diggs around. And in this game, maybe the adjustment should have been at least let Diggs have a try at Jackson, who was giving it, but then everybody was giving him a hard time. Zay, Robert Jones' son, Zay Jones was giving him issues as well. And we'll see if Kelvin Joseph or Nashawn Wright, who got kicked out of this game, if somebody can come in there and help the Cowboys. On the offensive side of the ball, Stretch, I wanted to get your take on what seemed like kind of an odd, Joe Philbin, who you've bragged on a lot this year because of COVID protocols, was not on the sideline. They had to bring the assistant offensive line coach out of the box to come down to the sideline tonight. And it was an odd decision. And I have to think that McCarthy was sort of over this decision to do this, but they were swapping in and out their left guards. And then, of course, their right tackles with Collins and Steele there. And so it made for sort of a strange evening. And I didn't know if you thought perhaps that could have played some role in the lack of tempo and the lack of cohesion with the offense this evening.
Yeah, I don't know why they were rolling those guys in and out of the game. I really don't. I still don't know why. And I've talked to, sometimes obviously I don't go to practice. I try to just watch the film and give you hey, this is what I see. I try not to listen to what anybody says. I try not to pay attention to what other people's opinions are. I never could figure out why they benched Williams in the first place. Now, I made a call over there to say, hey, why is this happening? And I think that the tune was, well, he's the most penalized, which obviously he was. I just don't think he deserved to be benched. And now, I mean, it's like you were saying, I mean, they're rotating guys in and out like it's basketball. So I'm not sure what the thinking is. I don't know that if it has anything to do, I would doubt that it would have anything to do with Joe Philbin being in the COVID protocol setup. But again, the thing that concerned me the most was, running the football. And that, to me, that's another, I think, very glaring point here is that when you can't run the football against Kansas City, which was the 26th ranked defense, and now the Raiders, which is a very average defensive front, when you can't run the football versus them, to be able to then set up your boots, set up your waggles, get your quarterback out on the edge so he can take some deeper shots, then to me, it really, that stings. And they ran toss the second series of the game. They got up under there and ran toss left. Zeke ran for 8 yards. And I'm thinking, okay, finally, they're getting the ball outside that tackle box and being able to do some things. But, boy, I mean, I don't know why they were rotating those offensive linemen. And then, I don't think they played that well. They're not coming off the ball. You saw Tyron bust. They tried to run a pump to the receiver to pump the wide receiver screen. They had Schultz go up the seam, and he's there. Dak doesn't have the time to get the ball off because Tyron turned the wrong way. Now, does it have something to do with him lack of practice and not practice time or them not practicing? very much because they didn't coming off a Sunday game to a Thursday. There's just a lot of little variables here, Matt, and I think that's what makes it very difficult when you have to go and grade a game like this, because it is so difficult to go out and perform when you haven't, you really haven't practiced full speed. And I can guarantee you, Tyron was not playing well, and I mean, Steele didn't play well, Collins didn't play well, Biotish didn't play well, Zach Martin is Zach Martin, but I mean, up front, this was not a good game for the Dallas Cowboys, and so I just think you got to, again, grading the assistant offensive line. He's getting an F. I don't give a damn about COVID or whatever. Get your guys coached up and get the guys in the game that are supposed to be in there.
Wow. People that are writing in this morning, that woke them up right there. And my goodness, on this, I don't know if anybody's going to work tomorrow or not, but my goodness. Okay. Now, the quarterback has been up and down lately. I would say, Stretch, that, a couple of big time throws to Gallup, one that he dropped in that the cornerback never saw, another one that he put right on the money, but he's also, continues to be loose with some throws. And of course, I think you brought up a good point, and I want to hear your take on this. Let's remember, he didn't have CeeDee Lamb, who could not get cleared to play in this game. And then you have Amari, who is, as an unvaccinated player, had to miss these two games. Do you think that's playing a role in some of the offensive struggles? I obviously he misses those receivers, but, he's got to be able to function without them. And through stretches of this game, man, they looked like they were in the mud or something. Yeah,
really, he made 5 really poor throws, and 3 of them were early in the game. We can obviously say, he's not as comfortable. And when you're running those deeper crossing routes, when you're running double move routes, when you don't have the speed that you normally have, that you're used to, you can tend to throw some balls poorly. I thought that early in the game, when they ran a comeback to Gallup and he got knocked around, so obviously his clock's going off in his head. He's knowing he's got to come back down that stem, and they called the PI on the Raiders on the play, but the ball it must have been 6 feet over his head. So I think he struggles still with some throws to the right. I think that bothers me, but I tell you what, he made some incredible throws. He continues to put the team on his back and try to get them in position, and had them in position, obviously, to go to overtime, to do some things after never leading in the football game. So I think he gave you a decent effort tonight. I can't give him anything more than a C, because you're continuing to see that he cannot, when you have backup guys in the game, and you got to hit those throws, especially it was 3rd and 3 late in the game. It's 3rd and 3, and he kind of scoots out of there to his right, and Brown's coming across, and he just throws a terrible ball. And so it leaves you shaking your head in those situations. Then he comes back, like you said, and he drops the ball into Gallup and threw some incredible balls. The inconsistency, it's bothering me. And then I'm going to tell you, on that last, when he booted out of there and he missed that throw to the right to Noah Brown, if you go back and watch the TV copy, I'm telling you, he's still gimping on that right side. I don't care what anybody says. I don't care. I don't care about hearing anybody else's opinion, other than knowing that, you can tell that he's still kind of favoring that right side a little bit. So I still think that's bothering him. Now, he may not use that as an excuse, but I believe that it is.
Wow, that's interesting. And obviously having to throw off that back foot and make the transfer and all that would play a role in every bit of that. Stretch the so basically receivers and tight ends. Now, Schultz had a great catch there as they were getting down there, getting ready to tie it up, and then he caught the two. Would you give, is that group also kind of a C, would you say? I mean, obviously Gallup made some big catches, but you had a few drops and even Schultz, who's been very dependable, had a drop. Do you think a C is fair for all those guys?
I would absolutely give them a very average grade. And if you're asking me, yes, I would. That's exactly what I would give him. You're starting to hear it enough, Mosley. It's bleeding off on you, even though you're on some European junket trip over there, staying in some hotel room with 24-foot ceilings. You must have. You got the bridal suite somewhere?
It's a great lobby I'm in right now, and I've had the help of Sebastian, the night manager. He just brought me some coffee, so everything seems to be functioning pretty well here. The last thing, I think we're going to give this – I think people are going to look at the score and remember this game as, this will be the Anthony Brown game, when honestly the offense didn't function that well, as we've documented. You did get a huge, in this league, you're just mostly touchbacks. They've tried to almost eliminate the kickoff game, and Pollard gets the 100-yard kickoff return. I mean, you almost hate, don't you, Stretch? I mean, there you are, kind of really falling out of the game in a sense, and then that ignites you as a team. You really hate to lose a game in which you get one of those huge plays from special teams. But I guess we have to give Johnny Fossil and the gang a little bit of an attaboy for that play.
I mean, it was a hell of a designed kickoff return, and absolutely I've been critical of him, and you have to give him credit on that for designing that kickoff return and for hitting that. And it was at a critical spot in the game. They needed that. So you got to give him you got to give him credit. Hey, you got to give Anger credit. I mean, he hits a big punt right there to take that ball out from being back there at the 6-yard line. But I'll tell you this, Matt, the thing that that I hate is you got the ball in overtime. You get Pollard brings it out to about the 13. I think Gifford block in the back. So about the time you want to give the special teams a lot of credit, then they just throw up a stinker like that. So it's because of that, I'd like to give them an A, but I can't. I mean, you got to give them a B because there were still some mistakes made in the kicking game.
Yeah, and I think when you make a huge play like that, it probably does put pressure on you. If you catch the ball at a decent area, you want to bring it back, and that did put them behind the 8 ball. And by the way, Stretch, final thing I wanted to bounce off of you, Hockley, this was Ed Hockley's son, Sean Hockley, did this game, and his crew, they threw a staggering amount of penalties. In fact, I think the Cowboys were penalized, I think 16 times for, like 166 yards. I mean, it was a huge amount. It was like the most, maybe one of the most all time for the Cowboys. But Stretch, don't you sometimes see crews that are almost just looking to make calls? That's what this one seemed like tonight.
Well, I mean, you say that, I try to stay away from being critical of the officials because I normally think they do a hell of a job. I think the thing that bothered me was the second drive of the game. The Raiders had the ball. They got the ball on the 40-yard line. They went down and scored. So obviously 60 yards for a touchdown, of which 46 of the 16 yards were penalty yards. And you just, at some point you just shake your head and it was the PI on Brown and, that set him up. But I tell you what, as a matter of fact, he had 2 in that second series. He hit the exacta for PIs in that second series. But I I don't know, Matt, if I want to really get on the officiating crew or get after them or not. I thought grading the halftime performance was pretty good. That old boy got up there and hit a leg, got up on the good foot. So that was a positive. So
I appreciate you bringing that up, because it brings me. There was a song he had, and it was Long Necks and Cold Beer, and he got him had a little prop up there. He got a red Solo cup and kind of acted like he was having a little beer up there. Luke Combs did a nice job. Now Werder's in love with Chesney, but I think he also likes Luke Combs. He loves Bro Country. Hanging out with friends, Stretch, doesn't require a special occasion. In fact, some of the best hangouts are just a few friends and some Miller Lite. What I found is, even in Paris, you think, oh, people, what are they drinking? Are they drinking wine and French wine and all that kind of stuff? Everybody I see, they got Miller Lite out, and it's a great thing to see. Basically, since 1975, Stretch, Miller Lite has been the beer with a taste you can depend on. No games, no gimmicks, just a great beer for people who like beer. Miller Lite, great taste, 96 calories. Go to MillerLite.com/Doomsday to find delivery options near you.
And Mosley, before we go, I know you're over there, and I know you're having a big time, and things are going good, and it's Thanksgiving Day, and you're having a good. We're in the middle of football season. Everything is going on. Mosley, you get a damn F. Get your ass back across the water, would you?
Or you could pick up some Miller Lite pretty much anywhere they sell beer. It's Miller time. Okay, Stretch, I appreciate you. Good night.
Get you a damn F and tattoo it on your right cheek and your nails.
Oh, my gosh. I'm getting coached up. And that was Stretch Plays, Glenn Stretch Smith. And Ed, since you've been down there handling all these interviews, I'll just let you know that one thing, Stretch, and he did hand out an F or two tonight. And boy, he did. One thing he's baffled by, and I think it'd be good for you and I to talk about, Ed, is the weird deal that they, like the third series, the Cowboys just decided, you know what, let's run a different left guard in. And maybe let's put Connor Williams, and then let's put Lyle Collins, who we didn't start tonight, started still at right tackle. Let's get Collins in there. And so there was some odd sort of shuffling in there between some of the offensive linemen. And, oh, by the way, on top of that, you didn't even have your O-line coach at the game.
Joe Philbin, right? Yeah. Right up on the COVID list before the game. Yeah. And it was odd because they just did it that one series, which I think was a 3-and-out, that they brought in Lyle Collins, who's a long time starting right guard or right tackle when he's healthy and in compliance with the league's various drug testing procedures, which has not been often in the past couple of years that he's had both of those things play in his favor. And then Terrence Steele, obviously, is somebody they really like. And then they brought in Connor Williams, who had been the starter for 25 consecutive games before he lost his spot last week. And to do it one time and for only 1 3-and-out series, like, it didn't make any sense. First of all, Mike McCarthy is whenever he talks about the offensive line, the first thing that he emphasizes is the importance of continuity. Well, you're disrupting the continuity needlessly. And only one, I don't understand why it was only once, because when he was asked to explain it after the game, he said that they had decided that they wanted those guys both to get some snaps in the game. So they each get 3 snaps. That makes a difference. And that it was also partly because they're in this situation where they're playing 3 games in 12 days. Well, that would make, both of those things would make sense if they played more than one series. But the fact that they just put him in there for one series, unless they were appalled by what they got out of him in those couple of plays, those 3 plays, and decided it wasn't worth the risk, that there was a substantial difference between the guys who were starting now and these 2 guys, made no sense to me whatsoever. And that it coincided with Joe Philbin's absence for the first time makes it even more bewildering.
Yeah, it was very strange, and you're right. Part of the explanation that, and I think I heard this from the another lineman. They said something along the lines of, well, he thought those guys had earned the right to play. I mean, it's like this is not like high school. Let's give Collins a series. He's earned that. He's been showing up at practice and he's had a good attitude. Let's get him in there. And so you're totally right to say that if they were going to do this to survive this tough stretch that we all love to talk about, 3 games in 12 days, how will they do it? But they didn't do it. I mean, none of it made sense at all. And the other part, Ed, that I wanted to bounce off of you, this quarterback, and he made 2 incredible plays to Gallup. And certainly his numbers are going to end up, they're skewed because it all happened in the fourth quarter. But to stretch his eye, he still thinks he's favoring that ankle. Like he sees throws where it's just not. He's not
pushing off.
And that's scary. And I think if he was asked about it, I think he would say, no, I'm totally fine. He might admit to maybe not getting his footwork like he would like it.
His completion percentage over the course of the year is among the very best in the league. So it's, other than the Denver game where he was at 48.7% and talked about, I'd come back from an injury, and I probably kind of didn't stress my fundamentals enough. And then he went back the next week after making that a point of his preparation and just shreds the Falcons. I wondered last week when he was making some errant throws against Kansas City, whether it would occur to him that, I was doing the same thing against Denver. I need to get back and make sure I'm exercising proper fundamentals in the second half of this game, and certainly in practice this week. But there isn't a lot of practice this week, and maybe that played into it. But overall, I think he's been pretty accurate. The thing that I think is unmistakable about the after effects of the injury that he suffered last year is just he's no longer a runner. He was one of the great dual threat quarterbacks in football, and he's not that anymore. Now I think he's a terrific passer, and he can win from the pocket, and he can still extend plays as well as anybody in the league and throw accurately on the move, but he is not a threat to run the football anymore, anywhere near the same way he was before he suffered that injury against the Giants.
Yeah, you're right about that. And even today, I was kind of watching him, Carr's not known as like a big runner at all. And he actually had like a 22-yard run, I think, in this game. Dak took off one time and he smartly stepped out of bounds. I'm not saying he should be taking hits every time, but you're right. Like that pressure that he puts on an offense to always be aware of him. The only time now, maybe around the goal line, they might use him. And then when he's just using his legs to get outside the pocket and make some throws. But this offense just didn't. I mean, think about it, Ed. One thing Stretch brought up was there was a crack toss or a one run that I think Zeke actually had 7-8 yards, whatever, and they didn't come back to it. There is one play that they always love. They got that penalty and it caused them. I should say the Raiders got the penalty, but it caused the Cowboys to decide to go for 2, and they did. It's a fun looking play. It's an option pitch. But have you ever noticed, Ed, on even plays like that, it requires a guy like Schultz, who obviously has become very, very reliable in the passing game, although he had a drop tonight, to like hold a block out in space against like a linebacker a lot of times or a safety. And it does not seem like a winning proposition.
He doesn't have the agility to do that.
Yeah. That seems like it's a lot to ask. Okay, you go hold this guy and you make this block. And of course, the guy they let run it was not one of their running backs. It wasn't Pollard. It wasn't Zeke. I believe that was Cedric Wilson who got that toss out there, on the deal. Now, Ed, if we think about this, the only reason they really got back in that game and had the chance to send it into overtime is because of what Pollard did, 100-yard return. Now, you would like to win those games when you get to 100-yard kickoff return. But, I mean, I think it's sort of important to point out that some of the things you were saying, it's sort of a miracle that they had a chance to win this game, given all the crazy stuff that happened. But it's also kind of a miracle that they were in it in some ways. But it took to kind of get them back in there when nothing was really working and they had fallen a couple of scores behind. They get that Pollard moment. And that was enormous from a special team standpoint. Now, the other bad part of that, Ed, is later in the game, he brings one out. They get a penalty and have to start that overtime drive way deep in their own territory.
Yeah, I mean, I think for the most part, through three quarters, they were sort of bedeviled by penalties, by a lack of explosive plays on offense, and then obviously poor field position on top of that. And they weren't able to really find themselves offensively until the fourth quarter. And, this is the third game this year that this defense didn't create a turnover. And the Cowboys are 1-2 when that happens. So we talked about the defense getting exploited. They also didn't redeem themselves by providing the offense any short fields to operate on. And then you go back and look at it, and I mean, how many times did the Cowboys give away points? The Tyron Smith penalty negated a touchdown that was culminated in a field goal. So that cost him 4 points. McCarthy tried for a 2-point conversion and took a point off the board. That was a point that they lost during the course of the game. Zerline missed a field goal and an extra point. That's at least 1 point. It was a long field goal, 59 yards. So it's hard to say those points should have been on the board, but it was pretty close. They cost, and then one of Anthony Brown's penalties put the ball on the 1 yard line, and the Raiders scored a touchdown by Marcus Mariota on the next play. So, I mean, they cost themselves with their mistakes all over the place all day long. That was really kind of the dominant theme as far as I'm concerned. I mean, they're bad on defense. They couldn't get a pass rush, and their secondary couldn't hold up at all. And we're talking about a Raiders team, to put it in perspective, they'd come in here having lost 3 straight games. They hadn't scored more than 16 points in any of them. And Carr had turned the ball over 6 times in 3 games. And none of those were issues for the Raiders today.
No, you're right. And about the only thing you can say about this defense was that Parsons continues to be a one-man wrecking crew. He almost got home a lot. He did finally get home for a sack. He had a tackle for loss right before that. I would just say, Ed, to your point from earlier, that'll be nice, I think, for him getting Gregory, getting DeMarcus Lawrence, especially back. I just don't think there'll be so much pressure on Parsons, because if the truth of the matter is, although like Hamilton and some of those guys and Dorrance Armstrong and Golston, I like how those guys play, but they don't bring the consistent heat that Parsons does. And I think it'll be nice for the Cowboys to basically not just have to almost be a one-man wrecking crew, because that's kind of what they are right now. I mean, it's like try to get Parsons home. That seemed to be their whole defense today.
Yeah. I mean, take for granted what his rookie, who didn't even play football last year for Penn State, he opted out. What he has been able to do this season is beyond incredible. It's almost unprecedented. I mean, numerically, statistically, he's played at the level of Bruce Smith or Lawrence Taylor at this point in his career. And like we said, he's done it without a whole lot of help. I mean, I know he's looking forward to having the 2 players you mentioned, Ware and Gregory, and Neville Gallimore. I mean, we always talk about Lawrence being a great edge rusher and all that, and he is. He's led the Cowboys in sacks multiple times, but he's also a really good run defender on the outside. So that could help the defense in a lot of different ways, and they need it. They have not ever really this season been a great defense. They've always given up a lot of yards. They've always been poor tackling in the open field. The thing that always saved them was creating the turnovers. And now we're starting to see that not happen every week on a consistent basis. I think two or three of the games where they have no turnovers have occurred in this 4-game stretch where they've gone 1-3. The good news is they're not competing in the AFC West where they went 1-3, and they're done with the AFC West unless they play one of those teams in the Super Bowl.
Now, wouldn't that be something? Of that crew, I would say the Chiefs,
yes,
by far have the best opportunity. Now, Ed, before we say goodnight, I did want to take an opportunity because people love this part of the show when we kind of say our goodbyes. But before I do that, I needed to say something. I read a book on this trip, and it's called The Power to Thrive. It's one of the reasons I'm thriving at even 5 a.m. here in France. Here's how you do it. We'll get you a free book, okay? Plus you receive a free gift. If you will go to this site, it's called powertothrive.net, okay? Powertothrive.net. It's a motivational book. It's based off, I'm a guy who comes from a religious background, so it speaks to me. 1 Timothy chapter, actually, it's the first chapter of 1 Timothy 1:7. And it's a fascinating read. This guy's a motivational speaker, Rich Cavanis, who I've gotten to know. He does a really nice job. And I'll tell you what else I'm going to do. If you end up proving to me that you've secured one of these books by going to powertothrive.net, I too will get you one of these T-shirts, these Doomsday T-shirts. I think that's going to bring in a lot of books. I'm watching right now as we speak, Rich do one of these seminars, Ed, and gosh, if we had you do have a blue suit. God, he's got this sport coat on that you would really like, and a quarter zip under it. It's a very, very good nice look. Okay, Ed, the Cowboys have a kind of a mini bye here. They'll get a little time off, and
not till after this next game. They have to play Thursday night against the Saints in the Superdome, and then they get their mini bye week.
The mini bye, I'm so used to them. For years they did it, and then finally, I think people screamed enough at the NFL. Don't let them do this. Don't let them do this. And they stopped letting them do it. But okay, you're totally right. It's after that Thursday game. Okay, that is a tough environment. That does not seem to be a particularly good team right now. Although we know Sean Payton loves preparing and he loves beating Jerry and loves being the team that he was associated with under Bill Parcells. Ed, I in a division this bad, you generally don't need to talk about like must wins, but given how this team's playing and where they are right now, I think there's a ton of pressure on them as they start preparing for next Thursday to go get a win.
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of it is because winning on the road is always a challenge. The Cowboys have, been successful at it. They're 3-2 on the road now, I think, after the loss in Kansas City. They've won at Foxborough. They won in Minnesota with their backup quarterback. They should be able to go into New Orleans, especially if their, roster is replenished with some of these players that we expect them to get back, both receivers, at least one of the pass rushers. Maybe Elliott's knee is either better or they decide for the full week of preparation, let's get Pollard ready to have the majority role at running back in this game. But, to the point you were making earlier about we thought the division was won. Well, now these other teams, the Eagles have won, 4 out of 5 games. Washington's starting developing some confidence in Taylor Heineke. And so those teams they still have games against the Cowboys. The Eagles have to get to play them up there. Washington hasn't played Dallas at all yet, so they've got 2 games left against Dallas. So those teams kind of now all have their fate back in their hands again because Dallas has squandered this incredible opportunity they created for themselves with the 6 straight wins by going 1-3 here the last month. So yeah, it is going to be a big game in New Orleans.
Okay, I'm going to throw a silver lining at you for Cowboys fans, and you got to go with me here, Ed, a little bit. The one silver lining for these fans who are already sort of don't really have much trust in Mike McCarthy, and people constantly ask me the question, I think Frito did earlier tonight. He's like, what does Mike McCarthy do for this team? And, I kind of finally came up with something like he seems to coach turnovers somehow. I don't know what I came up with. But if they sort of keep wobbling but get into the playoffs and lose in a wild card game, there is a scenario where they fire Mike McCarthy and they hire Kellen Moore as their next head coach.
So you're saying the silver lining is that they can still fire their head coach after a 6-1 start? The silver lining here, what little promise on the horizon? You can still fire your head coach after you go 6-1 to start the year.
I'm just saying, like, you would be surprised. Half our audience will hear that and be nodding like, like if you gave them a scenario where you could get rid of McCarthy, I think a lot of people would be on board. But in all reality, obviously, if they started to really wobble like that, then people might not be as excited about Kellen Moore,
or Dan Quinn.
Yeah. Although his name, by the way, Dan Quinn's name is starting to get mentioned in some of these, oddly enough, in some of these college openings, as well as Kellen Moore.
So we've gone at 6-1. Everybody's long-term concern was, how are we going to be able to retain Kellen Moore as the offensive coordinator and Dan Quinn as the defensive coordinator? And now you're suggesting things could unravel to the point that it's, okay, we're firing McCarthy and these other two guys aren't really that good either. So we need two coordinators and a head coach. I think you're overreacting a little. Let's save that for New Orleans.
Okay, we'll save it for one more game. I think the whole team needs to gather around and read Power to Thrive together. And then I think they could really get things going in the right direction. Ed, I'm trying to decide if I'm going to go straight to breakfast. Let's see what time it is. It's 5:08 a.m. Where you are, it's probably about 8. What does that make it? 8 o'clock or something?
10 o'clock. 10 o'clock.
Really? Oh,
yeah.
Wow. Okay. 10 o'clock where you are. I want you to go have an additional Thanksgiving meal tonight.
Thank you. I will.
And I'm grateful for you and Frito. We all have a lot to be grateful for. The medical emergency that your family endured recently.
Yours, Frito's. Yeah.
Yes, we've all had some major issues, and we're still here together. And for Frito and I, sometimes it's barely, but we're making it.
We're all together. And, one guy's in Arlington, one guy's in Plano, and one guy's in France. It's hardly all together.
But via Zoom, we're together. Our friendship continues and has thrived through all of it. Okay, Ed, thank you. Good work from you and for Mark Frito Friedman, who's out in far North Dallas. I say good night. Au revoir.
All right. You guys take care.
Walmart Plus members save on meeting up with friends. Save on having them over for dinner with free delivery with no hidden fees or markups. That's groceries, plus napkins, plus that vegetable chopper to make things a bit easier. Plus, members save on gas to go meet them in their neck of the woods. Plus, when you're ready for the ultimate sign of friendship, start a show together with your included Paramount Plus subscription. Walmart Plus members save on this plus so much more. Start a 30-day free trial at walmartplus.com. Paramount Plus Essential Plan only. Separate registration required. See Walmart Plus terms and conditions.
With the Wells Fargo Active Cash Credit Card, you can earn unlimited 2% cash rewards on purchases you want and purchases you need. That means you earn on what you want, like trying out that new workout class, and 2% cash rewards on what you need, like a foam roller for your sore muscles. That's the beauty of the Active Cash credit card. It's ready when you are with unlimited 2% cash rewards. The Wells Fargo Active Cash credit card. That's real life ready. Terms apply. Learn more at wellsfargo.com/activecash.